In this pretty short video, we are going to look at some of the common arguments you can make when answering topicality. We will first begin by looking at we meet. The we meet is often abbreviated with a W/M, indicating we meet. And what it does is it makes the argument that you meet the definitions that the other team has used with their topicality argument, saying that you are in fact within the realm of the topic and should be allowed to exist as an affirmative. Oftentimes you can think about it as saying no link. If the violation is a link argument, then you can use a we meet as a no link argument if you want to put it in the parlance of a disad. Next type of argument you can make when going for topicality is a counterinterpretation. And what a counterinterpretation argues is that there is a better definitional source to be used to understand the resolution. And there are three parts to any counterinterpretation. The first is going to be the counter definitions, i.e. what words did the other team define that you are going to counter define and bring better definitions into place. If you remember from the other video that there are lots of different reasons why certain definitions might be better than others, you might want to make some arguments in the 1AR and 2AR about why those definitions should be preferred over those other ones. The second part to a counterinterpretation is a we meet statement. So you want to say why your affirmative meets the definitions that you just read with your counterinterpretation. And then lastly, you're going to want counter standards or counter impacts that explain why your definition should be the one that is preferred for debate. What you are really trying to do is articulate why your understanding of the resolution is better. You want to explain what ground the negative team's interpretation provides and what ground the affirmative team's interpretation provides. And you want to be making arguments as to why your counter-interpretation is a better way to think about the topic and produce scholarship within it. For example, things you might consider. Who forces more generics? Are those generic arguments good or bad? What is the thing that we're supposed to be learning about? So a lot of resolutions have an object in which we can be learning about, i.e. space exploration, and the impacts that might be going along with it. Or you could be the focus on the solvency mechanism. Are we supposed to be learning about international cooperation or how legal restrictions operate? What is the target? What is the nuance that provides the unique educational possibilities via the resolution, and which interpretation of that resolution allows us to get at that centerpiece more effectively? That's kind of what you want to be doing when you're arguing about interpretations. Next argument is sort of this reasonability versus competing interpretations argument. And what reasonability really means is that you are framing it as the judge gets to decide who wins the topicality debate. Reasonability is saying that the AF is either within the topic or tangentially related to the topic and close enough to the topic that the negative still has plenty of ground and the debate wasn't unfair and that education was still being produced. And so if arguing for reasonability is arguing that, hey, even if we aren't strictly topical, we're close enough to topical that you should just let us slide so that we can learn about more important things or understand that the topic is fine and that we aren't doing anything with the affirmative to cheat to win. Competing interpretation means the judge shouldn't make a judgment call as to whether the AF is close enough to the resolution, but instead should only look at the metrics established via the debaters, i.e. the interpretation versus counter-interpretation, and dictate which one, based upon the argumentation that was presented in the debate, dictates the better interpretation for how the resolution should play out for whatever the goals are, whether it's a fair division of ground or education. Then there's a few defensive arguments you can make in the 2AC when answering topicality. The first is ground is inevitable. And basically when you make this argument, you are going to provide a few arguments that the negative could have read against your affirmative, and you are going to be making the claim, and this is the important part, you are going to be making the claim that the negative has to prove that the debate was impossible. And if the negative cannot prove that the debate was impossible, you should err affirmative and allow the affirmative to exist. And another defensive argument is that predictability is not possible. There are things like new affirmatives, new advantages that are always going to be broken, and those things are always going to be tailored to answer specific generic arguments and specific strategies that teams are going to be going for. And because of that, there's no way to actually predict all of those things that are going to be forthcoming, especially when you start looking at squads that have a bunch of coaches and have a bunch of card cutters. It becomes very difficult to keep up with all of the different arguments that they could be reading. And fairness is terminally non-unique. There are better coaches, back files, reputations. Ensure debate isn't fair, and so that any sort of fairness claims that they're trying to establish with Topicality are just non-starters to begin with, because debate's just never going to be fair, and so you have to find your nuanced ways in order to win. Last sort of thing is potential abuse, and it makes the claim that debate shouldn't be about what the community norms are, but just this one particular debate. And so they have to prove that there's in-round abuse. There are specific instances that prevented them from learning or winning, having the potentiality to win in that particular debate round. And the kind of justification for that is that generally people don't model who off of the winners of debate rounds. They just sort of look at who won, who lost, and who they have to prep for. They don't question how those debates were won or lost when thinking about their grand strategies for any upcoming tournament. And so no norms are able to be created via Topicality. And the other component to that is that potential abuse voting on potential abuse doesn't change actions. A lot of teams, if they lose to an argument about potential abuse and community norms, that doesn't cause them to stop reading certain AFs. What it really does is it creates an incentive just to create better front lines. And so there's no reason why voting on potential abuse or competing interpretations or those norms creations is a good model, because it doesn't actually influence anything as far as the norms are concerned. Well, I'm Daniel Stout of Johnson County Debate. This has been sort of a real quick video of some of the major arguments you can be making against Topicality in the 2AC. I hope you found that insightful.